Welcome to Mooney Reads, and welcome to a weekend reading update. It is Halloween, so it's Friday, and I'm going to talk about the books that I've read in the past week or week and a half, including 2 vampire books. And I'll also talk a little bit about what I've been crocheting and what I've been watching. And then I'll have a little book haul at the end. So to start things off, I finished Dead Collections by Isaac Fellman. This is vampire book number 1. Our main character is a vampire, as well as a trans guy and an archivist. He lives in the archive that he works with, unbeknownst to his employer. He is pretty dead set on staying mostly inside, kind of going out at night, but not really living a full life. That is until he meets someone who is dropping off a box to the archive, Elsie, and they end up talking about grief and fandom and really hitting it off. I would say that this is primarily literary fiction, but it is kind of one of those that's a little bit hard to define. I really, really loved a lot about this. From looking at the Goodreads reviews, I think that maybe the writing style was hit or miss for some people, but I loved it. It sometimes errs on the side of like dry or detached, really, but in that there are certain details and things that are picked up. And one of the things that really hit me within the narrative was when they would hit on such particular emotions or experiences, and it would almost just be mentioned some of the time, but still like cut so deep. And I just really like it when books are able to do that sometimes. This also has a lot of interesting inter-community conversations, talking about issues like transphobia, but also talking about embodying yourself, like recognizing your gender, and really pushing past comfortable in order to see yourself fully. It kind of shows, I think, the difficulty or the pain in being perceived, but also the joy in that. There's also some interesting stuff on the intersection of sexuality and gender. And it also deals with, like, I feel like a fair amount of queer discourse in some ways, like with the like overt transphobia, but also in the character working through his own like internal biases on the page. So there's messiness on multiple levels, but that's one of them. So this is complex and well written, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time with it. After that, keeping on theme with vampires, I finished A Dowry of Blood, which I listened to on audiobook and did not enjoy quite as much. I think a lot of the reason I didn't love this book as much has to do with kind of what is told about certain characters and the pacing. And I kind of wonder if, like, were the story, instead of being told retrospective, like, told in a different way, maybe that would have helped some things. I will start with some positives. The writing was really lush and atmospheric. So while I did have issues with kind of some of it, I do recognize, like, I don't know, the writing was pretty. There is a lot of skill there. This is definitely one of those books that, like, I'd be willing to try something maybe that the author wrote after this. And really, I thoroughly enjoyed, like, the last third of the book, which, of course, I can't really talk that much about because it's towards the end. But I do think that my experience of the book kind of suffered because of how some of the stuff went in the first kind of parts of the book. Specifically, I felt like a lot of what we heard about the antagonist, the unnamed vampire, we were told a whole lot towards the beginning. Like, we know that he was terrible and he was wonderful. And we get to see pieces of the terrible, but not a whole lot of the wonderful. And really the whole time that they were interacting, pretty much, it was like we already knew he was a walking red flag. And it's told in retrospect, and this is like a letter that she's writing to him like after he's dead. But I still think that there is a way to bring the reader into that. Like, I never felt like entranced in the same way that she described really like being in love with him and these other people really being in love with him. I didn't understand the good parts of it enough, so I became frustrated. Like, I think intellectually I understand this character is like really abused and like she's saved from this like huge trauma, so she wants this person to be good. Um but it still didn't make sense. And while I think that if this were a real person talking about their real experience, I would be a little bit more like, well, you know, they might not want to be in the head of their abuser, but this is a book, like a fiction book, and I just feel like I wasn't wrapped up in that way. I think wrapped up in a lot of the more action-based scenes, like when she has the first thing about like her being turned. I thought that was all very well done, but I think that my hang up in a lot of the beginning and definitely the middle of the book was just like, this guy is bad. You know. And I think because it didn't show that push and pull well enough, I don't know, the story was like a little bit more grating than it should have been. And I think some of the things that were supposed to be kind of showing that push and pull just read to me as more scary. Like, there's a scene in here that's supposed to be like sexy, and as much as there are some details that like evoke that, because of like so much of the dubious stuff around it, I just found myself like horrified the whole time. And like, I know that this is a horror book, but I felt like there was supposed to be a push and pull in a lot of this book, and at the end of the day I just didn't feel that. Instead, I was just anxious, and not in a pleasant way to me. So there are definitely good parts of this book. Like, I see why people like it. It's really well written, and I do think a lot of the scenes are engaging. I just didn't buy into the characters, or particularly the antagonist, enough to actually enjoy reading most of the book. After that, I pivoted to some short stories with Crawl by Max Delsohn. And this is literary fiction that focuses on a variety of trans guys and trans masculine people in the Seattle area. This ranges in terms of where these guys are in their transition, and the different issues that it looks at. So for instance, the very first story in here is a trans guy learning how to navigate cruising. But then there are a couple of stories in here with trans guys who haven't come out. There are people in various stages of transition and looking at different issues. So there's a lot about sex and sexuality, but this also talks about work and class, and a lot about friendships. One of the things I really loved about this is how immersed I felt with each story. It took almost no time to kind of get kind of in the headspace and really curious about what was happening next. And it's not like this is like super action forward or something like that, so it's not really like in that way, but I was still like really intrigued. And while I think there are distinctions in a lot of these characters where you can tell personality wise they're different people, they have similar experiences in other ways, which is maybe part of the reason it wasn't as jarring to go from story to story. But it also made it feel more cohesive. Like, this felt like a really purposeful collection. None of these felt like filler. And typically, most short story collections, at least that I read, my experience is usually that there are a couple that really hit it out of the park, a couple that really bomb, and then a lot in various phases in the middle. But I didn't feel like there were any in here that really flopped. And I think that they were all purposeful. I would highly recommend this, and I'm so thankful that I saw somebody review an arc of it. And of course I didn't like write down their name, and my mind is blank of everything. So I'll put their original post in where the links go so that you could check that out. But yes, this was a really good one. And those were the only things that I finished, but I have worked on a few. I don't remember where I was on this the last time I talked about it, but I am through the first 2 chapters. It's hard to say too much about that, especially because the chapters are so short. I'm probably going to put this on pause because it's a buddy read, and the friend that I'm buddy reading with, their copy had to go back because it was a library copy, so we're pausing on this. And I don't have a lot of thoughts. I'm hoping that the writing gets better because right now it's like kind of repetitive. Like there's some stuff, like I get what they're trying to do with being like kind of evocative in a particular way, but parts of it kind of read like someone who has a 1,000 word paper due but only has like 700 words written, you know. Hopefully it gets better. I'll see eventually. I also started Stag Dance because it felt like the next logical thing to read after Crawl. I'm not super far into it yet. I'm on page 40, and I think the first piece is a novella. One of the pieces is a novella, and the rest are short stories. And it's really interesting so far. There's like a sci-fi element that I didn't totally expect. And it's definitely also talking about like things within the trans community, which is very much like this also hits on a lot of those things, but this is like trans masc largely, and then this is more focused on trans feminine people. 2 totally different approaches too. But I'm excited to get into this. I've been anticipating it and just like haven't, just like every other book, I don't know, I just haven't for some reason. So I'm glad to be starting it now. And another book that I've been working on, also kind of related to those in some ways, it's called Side Effects on Being Trans and Feeling Bad by Hill Malatino. This is another one that I've had on my shelf for a while and felt perfect to go with these other 2 books. This is nonfiction, and it's definitely on the academic end, but this author is exploring the negative emotional landscape that can come with being trans, and not in the ways that I think transphobic reactionaries talk about trans people and whatever, but kind of looking at just some particular experiences that come from society being the way that it is, and looks at some of the details at what creates some of this, and how sometimes things that are made as coping mechanisms or maybe do have some positive bits to it, still can end up like creating negativity too. So it's really, it's a whole lot of nuance, and it's really cool so far. I'm only about 30 pages in, so I've gone through the introduction and I'm starting in on the first chapter really, so I don't have too much, but it seems really interesting. And now I'm gonna get into some things that I've been making recently. So stuff that I've been crocheting, and I'm pretty sure in the past week or so I've still been working on this scarf. I'm going back and forth a little bit about whether to add more before adding the hood. Eventually I'm just gonna have to make a decision, but that's where it's at for now. I've talked about that one before. And then I actually finished a couple things. So the hat that I was working on last video is finished. It's a little bisexual bucket hat. I've never made a bucket hat before, but I think it turned out pretty okay. I'm interested to try some other patterns and techniques or whatever, just to try to find good shapes and whatever, but this was fun. And then I also finished this, which is just a little beanie, split color kind of a thing. And I made this for my partner, starting with the yarn that I had used for the sweater that I think I talked about last time. And then, because I had orange left over and then went into some new brown yarn. Another thing that I did that's kind of related to this stuff is brainstorming and making lists. So I want to be able to really get into like a crocheting groove, especially because like not only do I like the idea of maybe being able to make people stuff, but it's also a very regulating activity between that and coloring, and sometimes, especially it's holiday season, I work retail, so I will need to make myself participate in some regulating activities in order to survive a little bit. So I wanted to have some stuff set up so that I could easily pick something, because decision fatigue is also like a thing, definitely. So I comprised a list of a bunch of different stuff that I could make, and then organized it and put it all in here. So I can either look by, like, if I want to make something small, or if I want to make a sweater, or whatever other categories, I can go look at what I have, and pick something. Or if my brain is just not feeling it, I can just flip to a page and just do whatever I land on. And I have video tutorials available for most everything in here. Some of it I can just make on my own, but most of it is either new stuff or like shapes that I'm not very comfortable with probably being able to make unprompted. And I can't read a pattern to save my life. Every time I try, I just get annoyed and then look up a video of somebody doing it, or somebody doing something similar. So hopefully this will help in my creative process with this stuff. After that, I have a little bit of a haul, starting with a book that I think I should have talked about last time, but I might have forgotten, so I'll talk about it now. But that is Angelica and the Bear Prince by Trung Le Nguyen, who wrote The Magic Fish, which I really, really loved. This is his newest book, and I don't know anything about it. I'm not sure that I've seen reviews on it yet, but he wrote it, so I bought it. It seems like it might be talking about friendship or romantic connection to a certain extent, but it looks like a lot of it is about burnout and recovering from burnout, which is something very relatable. So I think this one's going to be really good. Other things that I've bought recently, I already talked about Crawl. When I bought Crawl, I also got DILF, Did I Leave Feminism? A Trans and or Feminist Manifesto. And this is nonfiction that talks about the author's experience navigating feminism as a trans guy. But from my understanding, this person was kind of like a prominent writer and stuff like that before transition. And so he talks about his experience kind of moving through that in these spaces. Maybe their understanding of certain things changing. It sounds really interesting. And is one that I think will probably go maybe well after I read this, especially considering just kind of the nuanced issues that this one talks about. I think this will be kind of a cool read afterwards. Now, I also had a library trip this week. I ended up having to return the other volumes of Sasaki and Miyano. Without reading them, honestly, I wasn't that enthused, so it was really no loss when somebody put them on hold. But I ended up stopping very briefly by the library store, where they have books for $1, and blessedly this was here. I've thought about reading My Grandmother's Hands, because it's just one that if you read one book on trauma, like, this should be cited. Like, I've seen it talked about so much, and this is like new. It's in really good condition, so I of course bought it. And then I checked out a couple of books as well. Both of these I found on the new release display. Pterodactyl by Matilda Bernstein Sycamore. And this goes perfectly well with Crawl and Stag Dance. It's another trans lit fic, very weird, and also set in Seattle. All three of these, all the trans people in Seattle are all here, and I'm reading about them. And this is one that I remember seeing like a little bit about way before it was released, and I was excited about it, but then it left my brain just because that's how those things happen. But Matilda Bernstein Sycamore has done a lot of different anthologies. I know that's at least, I'm sure she's done a lot, but those are the works that I know of most. This is fiction. This is different than those, and I'm not sure how much other fiction they have, but this looks trippy and interesting. And one thing that I also thought was cool, when I actually got to really sit down and read the back of this does mention the AIDS epidemic, and I would imagine probably talks about it in a decent amount of this. And it also actually touches on COVID, which a lot of fiction doesn't, which is kind of bizarre. Like, I think it makes sense logically, just seeing how people react to it. I mean, it was a traumatic thing that happened, but it also adds up, like, just considering how many people want to pretend like it's like gone now just because lockdown's not a thing anymore. But this actually talks about COVID-19 lockdown, and I'm really interested to see, like, with it mentioning both of those things, what happens. It also seems like it's going to be pretty, like, trippy. Talks about drugs and being a club kid in New York. This person's originally from Seattle, but they go to New York and come back to Seattle. Anyways, the other book that I got was Genocide Bad by Sim Kern. As you could maybe guess from the title, this book is talking about the genocide in Palestine. And they go through and talk about various propaganda and I think debunking it, but there's also memoir aspects. And I've seen them talk about the book a lot, so I'm interested to actually get into it. That is all for what I've been up to the past week or so. Let me know what you've been in. Oh, I didn't talk about TV shows. So, I really haven't had, like, a lot of stuff of note, I think, in terms of, like, movies, but I tend to forget what I watch sometimes because I don't write it down the same as books. But we've been really going through, one of the Halloween baking shows, and that's just been a lot of fun. And we watched, like, a season and a half of that, and started on a pumpkin carving game show. We've also had some scary movies on. Like, I know that I've watched the first Scream at least 1.5 times recently. I know that we've had other things on, but the majority of what I've retained is Scream and Halloween baking. So that's been the vibe. And that's all I have. So in the comments, let me know what you've been enjoying recently. And thank you all so much for watching. Bye.